Hello and welcome to the Pup Mommy. This is part two of a two-part series that I'm doing on breeders and breeder types that are out there that you should be familiar with, especially if you choose to go down that path when you adopt a dog. Now, I know that there are some people who are extremely adamant about the only way to adopt a dog is through a rescue or a shelter, but there are still some people out there who really want that German that German short-haired pointer, or they want that Affin Pinscher, or they want that Cane Corso, and not necessarily are you going to find those dogs in shelters or even with breed-specific rescues. So in part two, or I should say in part one, I talked about the highly reputable breeder, experienced breeder, the hobby breeder, and then also the specialty breeder. In this part two, I'm going to talk to you about the commercial breeder, the backyard breeder, and the puppy mills. So let's get started. Now, fourth type of breeder that I'm going to mention is the commercial breeder. This is the type of breeder that most people come into contact with. They can come into contact with this particular breeder from the AKC Find a Puppy website. They can come into contact with them by Googling, by Dogster, by other websites that they advertise on. Now, with the commercial breeder versus the hobby versus the highly reputable, commercial breeders have dogs available all year round. Litters and waiting lists, I should say waiting lists are almost non-existent for the dog. There's always dogs available. The other difference is most of the commercial breeders will not have the dogs inside their home. They have kennels on their property. So that is another major difference. The other thing to keep in mind also is that when they tell you that their dog is AKC registered, that doesn't necessarily mean that the dog is going to meet breed standard. What I had said earlier, it depends on what you want to spend and what you're willing to settle for. You will notice that even though the dogs are healthy, even though the dogs have pedigrees, there are still differences when you look at the headpiece, when you look at the coloring, when you look at the shape of the dog and so forth. There are little differences that people, if you're experienced in that breed, that you're going to pick up on. So the other thing to keep in mind with, unless you negotiate it up front, most of the commercial breeders, once they sell you the dog, once they give you the dog food, the paperwork, the vaccinations, everything else, if you have questions, they're there. They'll be willing to answer, they'll be willing to help you. But unless you negotiate it up front, many of the commercial breeders will not take the dog back if something happens to you. So keep that in your mind. Keep that, I should say, in the back of your mind. Now, the fifth type of breeder, of course, is the backyard breeder. And the backyard breeder is many times what you're going to find on Craigslist, or you're going to find that, that all of a sudden, something happened and their dog had puppies. They need extra income. Most of the people do not have really solid breed experience. If they need extra income, they're not going to care who they breed their dogs to in terms of temperament and in terms of physical health. If you want a beagle, sure, I got beagles, but what about the beagle? Where did it come from, and what were the parents, and so forth? Because I would tell you, with very, very reputable hobby breeders, you can meet the parents. You can meet the parents, you can meet the father, the mother, you can see some of the other siblings. When you get into the backyard breeder, basically some of the backyard breeders will also supply the local pet stores. All right, we're not talking the huge chains. We're talking the local pet stores. So there's very little contact with the breeder. Once they make the sale, that's it. Goodbye, good luck, best wishes. And you really, when it comes to temperament, when it comes to the physical health of the dog, the mental health of the dog, it's really a throw of the dice. So, you're going to find that, if you want to spend $500 on a dog, $300 on a dog, $800 on a dog, this is the type of breeder that you're going to go to rather than spending thousands of dollars on a dog. So again, something to keep in mind of what you're willing to settle for, what your budget is. And then finally, you have the puppy mills. And the puppy mill dogs are usually the dogs that you're going to find in some of the very large chains. Many of the states now are outlawing the sale of dogs in pet stores and so forth. I know here where I live in Illinois, that has happened. Whether or not, some people may say, well, that's a very good thing, but you can look at it in a couple of different ways. Because what happens is, if you go to a pet store, you can actually physically see the dog. You can handle the dog, you can play with the dog, you can kind of get a sense of the dog. What a lot of puppy mills are doing now is they are turning online to sell their dogs. And in that case, it's a real, what I said earlier, a throw of the dice. You don't know what you're getting. They're going to have nice pictures of the kennel. They're going to have nice pictures of the dogs. They're going to have nice pictures of everything, but you just don't know what it is that you're getting. You don't know the health of the dog. You don't know what the vaccination status is. You can't really see the kennels themselves. And the dogs you can actually sometimes get a really terrific dog, but at this other times there are so many people who have had heartbreak because their dogs have fallen ill, they've become sickly, and it can be just a mess. So my suggestion is, when you are ready to adopt a dog, because it is so subjective, it is so personal. And once you fall in love with a dog, it just really kills you if something happens to that dog, or the dog falls sick, and then you're a mess. And then all of a sudden, the financial bills and the vet bills, or else you have to put the dog to sleep. That's something that's just a whole nother emotional story that you don't want to go into. I don't want to go into. So that's it for the second part of this two-part video series. We covered the commercial breeders, the backyard breeders, and of course the puppy mill breeders. In the first video, I'll leave a link to that video. Those are the breeders that, especially the highly reputable and the hobby, that you want to try and connect to. It's difficult, but it can be done. And then also I mentioned the specialty breeders, those breeders that breed for law enforcement and police, military, the working line dogs, and then of course the personal protection dogs, and also the dogs for people with disabilities. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them below. I hope you found this informative, and if you have any other questions for me, again, my contact information is in the description section. And thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to click and subscribe. Bye for now.